For Chevrolet, it was the first sports car in almost 40 years. There were other firsts, too. A fiberglass body that required a unique wiring harness since the glass did not conduct electricity. Less than 12 months of development time. Poor performance for a sports car. And poor demand for a car that was supposed to be in great demand. Soon after the first car rolled off the assembly line in June of 1953, Chevrolet found the demand for the car much less than their market research had shown. Only 300 cars were built that year, and not all were sold. The trend continued into 1954. But if you tuned into Dave Garraway, the Corvette sounded like a can't-miss success story.
To say there's a little of the boy in every man and a little of the tomboy in every girl. I think she was right. I think that explains the way we feel about sports cars these days. Well, here's about the happiest automobile I've ever seen. The men who designed this had fun. And the builders and the testers had fun. And while it's never going to take the place of the family car, I, for one, am going to have a lot of fun owning it. Now, this could never have happened unless the world's largest manufacturer of automobiles had put its tremendous resources back of the job of designing and building a sports car to uphold American leadership in every field of transportation. They built her to handle like an angel, with every ounce of weight right where it belongs for perfect balance, clean and sleek and efficient looking, and light and strong. And they kept the cockpit simple and practical. For the power plant, they started with the finest valve and head engine. Some extra special features of higher compression, triple side draft carburetors, and dual exhaust give her 160 horsepower. Naturally, the automatic transmission quadrant's on the floor. That's in keeping with sports car tradition. In addition to the speedometer, there's a tachometer to measure engine revolutions. They call her Corvette, and she belongs to the highway just for the sheer and simple joy of driving, for the open road and the country byway, for Mr. and Mrs. America in a carefree mood. Boy, what a car.
Chevrolet soon learned that it was going to take more than a pretty face to increase sales of the Corvette. For 1955, a V8 engine was installed to help the Vette keep time with the fast-rising Ford Thunderbird. The Corvette needed to get its feet wet in real competition and build a performance image. Chevrolet production cars were already involved in all forms of racing. In February of 1956, Zora Duntov led a team of 3 Corvettes to a Daytona Speed Weeks event. Chevrolet went head-to-head with Ford with mixed but good results. The 1956 Sebring 12-hour race saw 4 Corvettes entered with factory support. With 2 cars finishing 15th and 9th, the results were credible for a first-time effort in long-distance racing. In SCCA racing that year, Dr. Richard Thompson earned the C production title with a Corvette, something he was to repeat in 1957. Chevrolet was getting attention on the NASCAR circuit also, which in turn increased sales. To help maintain its performance edge, the Corvette was available with fuel injection and a 4-speed transmission in 1957. As was the 283 horse 1957 racing season, Chevrolet had a full lineup of race-worthy vehicles.
At Sebring, Florida, open to all classes of sports cars. It is the longest race in the United States. Though there are winners in each class, the champion driver is the one who completes the most mileage within the 12-hour period of the race. It begins with a traditional Le Mans start.
Here we see the Corvettes, starting with the SS, a very fast prototype that failed to finish the race. Just beyond it, the SR2. Both cars had very short careers due to racing politics. Today, the SR2 looks better than it did in 1957.
The simulated road course is laid around an abandoned airfield with S-curves, straightaways, and hairpin turns. It's a challenge all the way. The drivers will navigate this treacherous course from 10 o'clock in the morning until 10 at night, handling every sort of driving condition and at top speeds. In the pit area or on the track, every second counts.
The number 3 car of Duncan, Kilborn, and Jeffords finished 3rd, with Dick Thompson beating the Mercedes 300 SLs in B production.
Dark now, and as the race goes on into the night, the driving becomes more hazardous. Pit crews are able to identify their cars only by distinctive lights mounted on the side. To go, and the preceding 11 have taken their toll. Few of the starting cars remain. The drivers that do are weary but alert. In racing, you have to be. The Sebring champion roars across the finish line as fireworks signal the end of 12 hours of dangerous, high-speed day and night driving.
It's the middle part of June in 1960. In the small town of Le Mans, France, it's business as usual here as in any other town. But underneath it all is an excited buzzing, an anticipation of the 24 hours of Le Mans automobile endurance race. Among the entries from all over the world were 3 cars carrying the American tradition. The local newspaper, Le Maine, announces the arrival in town of the United States Corvette team. Racing entrepreneur Briggs Cunningham is back at Le Mans after a 5-year absence, bringing with him 3 identically prepared Corvettes and a Jaguar prototype. Hidden away in this backstreet garage, the Corvette team makes final adjustments prior to their trip to the track. Alfred Momo and his New York crew have prepared the cars for battle and are here under the trained eye of Cunningham, along with the father of the Corvette, Zora Arcos Duntov. Pitted against the lighter Ferraris and Aston Martins, the Corvettes, at 2,980 pounds, are expected to have quite a challenge ahead of them. Momo had encountered problems preparing the cars and had sent the blue and white racers back to Chevrolet. The factory made several modifications, including complete new motors with newly designed aluminum cylinder heads for all 3 automobiles. The Corvettes did not appear to be highly modified. Yellow driving lights accented the otherwise stock-appearing front end. Other racing modifications included additional air ducting, an adjustable steering column, vented competition brakes, and a last-minute addition of auxiliary brake lights. The oversized gasoline tank had to be enlarged even more because the 37-gallon capacity would not allow the car to complete the required 25 laps between fuel stops. Deflector screens and additional louvers on the hood were installed, the former to assist in windshield protection, the latter to help in venting engine compartment heat. The headlight covers of the 3 Le Mans Corvettes were painted differently, red, white, or blue, so as to easily differentiate between them as they passed or entered the pits. They were numbered 1, 2, and 3. In those days, the racers were very streetable, and most were driven to the track from their respective garages. And on the way, as you might expect, they usually made a stop at the corner filling station for gasoline. As Duntov looks on, the tanks are topped off and the cars continue their trip to the racetrack. Duntov and Chevrolet factory mechanic Frank Burrell provided manufacturer support to the Momo crew. Much of the Le Mans racing circuit is actually public highway before and after race day, so here we see normal commuter traffic and a casual cafe operation a few days prior to closing the streets for the competition. Entering the Le Mans pit area, team manager Cunningham and Duntov exit the lead Corvette in front of the Chevrolet pits, with space provided for the number 6 Jaguar and the numbers 1, 2, and 3 Corvettes. One of the driver positioning circles for the famed Le Mans running start. One of the Corvettes pulls out for a preliminary course inspection. Under the Dunlop Bridge, past one of the notorious corner sandbanks of Le Mans. And onto the long Mulsanne Straight, where traffic is as usual 364 days of the year. Technical inspection, always a controversial part of the carnival that is Le Mans. Pre-race spectators look on as cars are scrutinized. Bob Grossman nervously awaits his turn with the inspectors with the number 1 car. It's race day. Thousands upon thousands of spectators and seemingly every police officer in France mill about the race cars prior to the 4:00 p.m. starting time. The Corvette team sits proudly, awaiting the command of their drivers. Pre-race festivities includes a parade of Chevrolets. A last-minute strategy meeting between Duntoff, Cunningham, and the Corvette drivers. And the race is on. The Corvettes get away cleanly. The aluminum head motors had been used for testing at Le Mans, but it was feared they would not withstand the brutal punishment of a 24-hour race. So cast iron heads with larger valves were installed for the race itself. A 4th Corvette, entered by the U.S. team Camarati, was driven by Lilly and Gamble. The team also fielded 3 birdcage Maseratis. Competitors flashed by a gaggle of gendarmes. The Camarati Corvette finished an unofficial 10th, but was not awarded that position because it did not complete the minimum number of laps. The Cunningham Jaguar into the pits for inspection and driver change. About 2 hours into the race, Le Mans was attacked by a torrential rainstorm. Kimberly and the number 1 Corvette, having completed some 32 laps, crashed in the poor weather. The car caught fire due to the use of a combustible solution in the windshield cleaner tank. The solution leaked onto the hot headers, resulting in the fire. Pit action was always frantic at Le Mans, particularly since the rules allowed only 2 people to attend the car at one time. Here we see Corvette mechanic Bob Zimmerman changing tires and adjusting brake drums as his colleague tops off the oil tank. Oil, water, or fuel could only be added after a minimum of 25 laps had been completed between stops. Here, 2 course inspection officials apply a seal to the oil filler cap as Zimmerman struggles to change tires. Briggs Cunningham, unable to assist materially, orchestrates his pit crew. Meanwhile, out on the racetrack, Ferrari and Aston Martin dominated the race. At one point, car number 3 lost coolant, and because of the 25-lap minimum liquid adding rule, could not refill. So American ingenuity came to the fore, and for the next 25 laps, car number 3 pulled into the pits each lap and received a cold water and ice bath until it could again have its radiator replenished. After the checkered flag, here are the ravages of racing. The number 2 Thompson-Windridge car completed 207 laps before retiring at 11:15 Sunday morning. It reached speeds of 151 miles per hour. The number 3 car of Finch and Grossman finished first in GT and 8th overall, its position boosted by Finch's extraordinary driving efforts in the rain. Of the 25 cars that completed the 24 hours, only Ferrari, Aston Martin, and Corvette appeared in the top 10. Now it's over 20 years later, and here, fully restored, is the chassis and running gear of Le Mans Corvette number 2. All restoration is as it was in 1960. Including the Hallebrand knockoff wheels. The front suspension included dual sway bars. The car featured metallic brake linings with a built-in cooling fan. And air ducting that controlled airflow into and out of each brake assembly. Heavily finned drums worked well in stopping the Corvette competition cars. Two auxiliary Bendix fuel pumps, in addition to the normal engine-mounted pump, moved the fuel. Positraction was also installed. Traction bars helped measurably in handling. The roll bar assembly bolted directly to the frame. Rather than the usual spot welding, full penetration welds were used for extra strength. The aluminum radiator had an aluminum oil radiator attached to it, both helping in lowering overall weight. 1960, a mixed bag of success for the American Corvette racing effort. In 1962, Delmo Johnson, a Dallas, Texas Chevrolet dealer and amateur road racer, ordered this Corvette in competition form from the Chevrolet factory. Special racing options included stiffer shock absorbers, finned brakes, brake ventilation scoops, and a quicker steering ratio, a 37-gallon fuel tank, and the new 327 cubic inch fuel-injected engine, which produced 360 horsepower. It was also ordered with a 336 positraction rear end, which provided it with a 150 mile per hour top speed. But all of these modifications would not be enough to be competitive at Daytona, Sebring, and Nassau. So General Motors delivered some special parts to Johnson, including wider wheels, specially louvered hood section, and front wind deflector, all of which were to be known as the Sebring package. Johnson also removed the bumpers and added hood straps and a front-mounted external oil cooler. The steering gear was gusseted for strength, and additional cooling ducts were cut into the simulated scoops beneath the headlights. Johnson quickly prepared the car and drove it to the Daytona 500 in February of 1962. But its first racing effort was not a success, as it retired early with engine difficulties. During its next race at Sebring, it finished an accreditable 24th place, completing 169 laps, or an even 1,000 miles. The remainder of the 1962 season was very busy for this Corvette. It raced in a total of 48 out of the 52 weeks in that year, before being sold by Johnson, who began preparation of an all-new 1963 model. Number 47, a 1963 Corvette competition coupe, restored to original specifications as it was prepared for a special 1963 NASCAR race, the Daytona American Challenge. This was one of 4 cars prepared by Mickey Thompson for the factory. and was destined to be used in only one race, the 1963 NASCAR Daytona American Challenge. The engine, a 417 cubic inch version, put out 500 horsepower and was fitted with a Holley 780 CFM carburetor. Other features included an external starter button on the firewall, and an emergency electrical shutoff switch. An external oil cooler mounted in the grille. A sturdy front sway bar assembly. Four-wheel disc brakes and 15-inch by 7-inch wide wheels front and rear. A side-exiting exhaust system. A total of 8 shock absorbers were used. The battery was suspended at the rear of the car to help improve weight distribution. An alloy cast differential assembly. This was no ordinary Corvette. Here, the fuel tank protrudes from the rear section of the car, actually straddling the drive shaft. The interior was not highly modified. It included a welded-in roll cage, S&W instruments, and a large fuel tank enclosed by aluminum sheeting. Junior Johnson drove the car for Thompson, securing the pole position by qualifying at 162 miles per hour. The car encountered problems during a torrential rainstorm when the floor pan filled with water, which turned to steam heated by the exhaust system. The steam obscured Johnson's vision. He pulled into the pits, allowing Bill Kraus to continue the race, in which it finally finished third, behind second place A.J. Foyt in another Corvette, and first place Paul Goldsmith in a Tempest. Yet another 1963 Corvette was built to international racing specifications, the Grand Sport. This car has been meticulously restored to its original specifications as raced at Sebring in 1964. Its history as one of 5 Grand Sports is expansive indeed. A heavily louvered hood covered an all-aluminum motor featuring 58mm Weber side draft carburetors, which produced 480 horsepower. Heavy modifications are obvious on this serious racer. A thorough development program brought the dry weight of the Grand Sport down to 1,950 pounds. The frame weighed in at a mere 160 pounds. A cooler mounted on the rear of the car kept the differential at low temperatures. Flush-mounted gas fillers helped give the car its competitive edge. Lights illuminated the car's number during night racing events. Flush-mounted access panels. Brake cooling ducts. Flush-mounted door handles. The car was fitted with Halabrand knockoff wheels, 8.5 inches wide in front, 9.5 inches wide in the rear. The car was originally raced at Nassau in 1963, with Roger Penske and Jim Hall sharing the driving chores. Again at the 1964 Nassau event, pushed by Pabst and Thompson, and in Sebring in 1964 with Foyt driving.
Let's go back to the Bahamas. Only this time it's 1984, and the restored Grand Sport is taking part in a vintage racing event that recreates the spectacle that was held there some 20 years ago. Located near the Los Angeles International Airport is a small shop owned by a man familiar with just about every model Corvette ever produced. Dick Gullstrand's love for the car is evident.
I did get one finally in '58 and immediately started racing it, even though I'd been running some SCCA events and other cars. The excitement with the Corvette was just incredible. And of course, with the aerospace background and my engineering, I started to play with it. And of course, part of the excitement, as I said before, was the innovations, the ability to change a car, and the pride in accomplishment and doing something very special was really exciting. And of course, my old hot rod days too, with my Model A's and all that, started to come into focus. So I did very well. I was surprised at first. They didn't really like my driving style. I was a little sideways from the old midget days, and I think at Riverside and Willow Springs and Paramount Ranch and all the rest of them, they were a little bit shocked, but it won races, and of course it got a lot of attention.
Dick's engineering background and ability to make Corvettes go faster led to the formation of Gullstrand Engineering. To improve the performance of the 1984 models meant a lot of hard work.
We finally came up with a car after 2.5 years of work called a Grand Sport 80, which was just deemed one of the best cars in Europe. We took it to Germany. It made the cover of one of the big magazines in Germany and was the fastest car ever driven on street tires at Hockenheim, Germany. And it was at the Frankfurt show this year, 1987. So we're extremely proud of the car, and it's a breakthrough for the Americans again, and of course, for my first love, the Corvette. In the beginning, Chevrolet was good enough to let us have a late '83 Corvette to play with. And as always, I can't leave them alone, so I had to start fooling around, and we drove it, we tested it, and the car was exceptional. I was really kind of shocked. I didn't know what I was going to do to improve it. So what we started with was basics. We worked with Monroe to develop a Formula GP shock. We developed polyurethane components. We did some Heim-jointed links. We did special sway bars and springs. The end result was that the car handled very, very well, was still drivable, and started winning slalom and autocross championships. Once we got the suspension working properly and the car really handling, the big complaint then was horsepower. How do we get more power out of the car? We were all used to cars that had 300-400 horsepower in the 60s and 70s. Now what do? Well, Traco Engineering, being right next door, had an exceptional history on engine development over the years, and but they weren't into the electronics part of it. And of course, with the new engine management systems, everything is based on the control of a computer. So we had to make the decision between us that we would invest in equipment and technology that would allow us the luxury of getting involved in the engine management electronics, which would then allow us to legally develop an engine that would put out horsepower and still would meet the small EPA requirements. So we entered into a program of development and found that we could, with pretty much the standard engine, develop well over 300 horsepower and 390 foot-pounds of torque at around 1,800 RPM using all stock bottom end, and of course a lot of work on the cam, heads, manifold, and headers. And that was beginning of the ultimate concept we call now Grand Sport 80. On one of our finished Grand Sport 80s, you can see the differences in the engine. It's pretty subtle changes. There's not a lot we can do to the exterior because of the requirement of the belts and so on. But if you'll notice, there's Siamese runners, we have headers on it, and we've adhered to all the EPA required equipment. Everything is still on it. The factory, the mass airflow sensor, the throttle body, all of the equipment is still attached. And so we've modified nothing at all on that part of the engine. But this engine, this one in particular, puts out 360 horsepower at 5,000 RPM and develops 430 foot-pounds of torque at 1,800 RPM. We're really pleased with the results of the Grand Sport 80. All the development work and engineering came out very successfully. We're really proud to offer the public now a car they can really enjoy.
On the road or on the track, the Corvette has become a genuine international thoroughbred. Corvette is represented by the Protofab Morrison team in the IMSA GTO class, a very competitive car that driver Greg Pickett likes a lot.
Well, what we really like about the Corvette this year is that it's been such a real good package. We came right out of the box with a completely unproven and untried car, and we were second the first time out. We've scored a lot of points the rest of the way, and we've had all kinds of motors in it. We've had a V6 turbo motor in it. We've had a normally aspirated V6 like we have here, and we've had a V8. And we've been successful with all the power plants. So I think that really goes to show the versatility of the Corvette as a race car. I mean, you can lightweight with a little motor and do really well, and you can have a big bellowing V8 and do equally well. So it's an agile car. It's very precisely driven. I think it goes better when rather than being thrown around, if it's kind of just coached around more or less. And I think that really brings out the best in the Corvette. It's a finesse car. I mean, it always has been, and I think it always will be.